So we can contribute to all of those. Now here's the key. If you go around saying you're going to contribute to all 19 of those, you come across like a snake oil salesman. I can do this, I can do that, I can do the other. So what you have to do is focus on one or two. One or two. Because people need focus, need soundbites. And you've got people who believe we are trivial forever, and you're trying to change that behavior, it will require focus. Derek's picking on health, which I think is a good one, and the other good one I think is economic development. I think those two absolutely can win the game for us, but it differs from one community to another, and you have to pick the one or two that resonate in your community. Don't try to do them all. So, the big idea, the future of recreation, the big idea associated with reposition is that funds are, here's the key phrase, invested in solutions to a community's most pressing problems or a country's most pressing problems. The term investing suggests a positive forward-looking agenda with a return on the investments. Elected officials have no mandate to fund programs. Their mandate is to invest resources into solutions. When my recreation people, in College Station come to me and say, Crompton, you've got to fund this program, the answer is why? I got elected on a platform which is a contract with my people who voted for me. And that contract, I agreed to do some things. Now, if you in recreation are going to contribute to those things, in my case it was economic development was the primary thing. If you're going to help me get economic development, I will give you resources. If you're not going to facilitate economic development, which is the platform I ran on and the people wanted, I'm not going to give you any resources. In fact, I'm going to take them from you. I'm going to give to somebody who will give me economic development. You've got to ally with what the people are saying they want through their representatives. That's just the way it is. So I haven't got time to go all this way through, but I picked up a couple of these boxes. I talk about all these various benefits. I've just picked up a couple to the last few minutes here to say a word or two about. I picked on this one, property values. So I've got to start with John Nash. Capability Brown, 1750s, yes, all of the great country parks of England, Capability Brown is handed. Then Capability Brown hands over to Humphrey Hepburn, marvellous country estates, he builds on that, and Hepburn then turns up with Nash, who's an architect. Nash does about 40 estates in England with Hepburn as his, Repton as his ally, and then Nash gets hooked in with the Prince Regent. You'll recall that by 1810, King George had gone quite mad. He'd been on the throne since 1760, had to deal with you lot and the American Revolution and the Tea Party and all that. Of course he went mad. So he had by 1810 been replaced by the Prince Regent, who really had authority in view of his father's madness and insanity. And some of the Prince Regent's advisors said to him, Prince, you're out there in western London, in Marylebone, you own lots of agricultural land and it's leased out to cows. But London's expanding, and if you took the cows off and built houses, you could generate much more wealth. And so the Prince Regent said, well, that's super, I'd like to be richer, but I am going to be the king, King George IV, 1820, I am going to be the king, and so it better be an upmarket sort of housing stuff if you're going to do it. And so he hired John Nash, this superb architect from the country, to do this. And so Nash created his housing plan. Taken from, I won't rubbish it around his papers and things, Nash established as a central principle of his plan, and I quote from Nash's diaries, that the attraction of open space, free air and scenery of nature with the means and invitation of exercise on horseback, on foot and in carriages shall be preserved in Marylebone Park, real estate development, park, as allurements or motives for the wealthy part of the public to establish themselves. And so he was doing what golf course developers do today, plonking in a park, and it would allure where people would come. And so you created the first great urban park, purpose-built, Regent's Park, Prince Regent, Regent's Park, London, magnificent park. And what you see here is the famous Nash terraces, these blocks around the edge, and you can see the building dates in here around the 18-teens and 1820s, all these Nash terraces around the edge, and a private park. A private park which has a carriageway around here which you can parade and flirt and do your stuff with your carriage here around the 4-mile track around there. But it's only a restricted entrance for the wealthy, and you paid 2 guineas a year to get in to do it. But you lived and had the 2,500 Nash terraces around there and had these wonderful views over the parks. And so, of course, they were very highly sought after. But the question is, why were they highly sought after? Was it just so they could strut their stuff in their carriages around the edge? And there were one or two homes in the middle. The prince had some concubines, and very interestingly, John Nash was in his 60s. He married a 20-year-old who's thought to be the Prince Regent's mistress, but that's a whole other story. So why did these people seek to live there? Well, the answer was given to us by Edwin Chadwick. Edwin Chadwick, the great social reformer of England, his inquiry into the sanitary conditions of the labouring population in England was published in 1842. He was a Poor Law Commissioner. And so you'll recall that England in those days, rapid, and I'm getting to America soon, bear with me, rapid urbanization and squalor. People poured into the cities with the Industrial Revolution. 300 people to the acre, living in all kinds of inhumane conditions. Pervasive filth everywhere. Horse and carts dumping their stuff. 2 privies for 200 people. Outdoor cesspools. Animals running around. People slaughtering things in the middle of cities. Carcasses everywhere. The stink was horrendous. And so we had the miasmas. And people believed that people got sick in those days from the noxious gases of the smells of the city. That was the source of all illness, known as miasmas. And so I take from Thomas Southwood Smith, who was the leading medical authority in England, the medical chief director, or whatever they called him in those days, his report in 1830. And here's what he said. Vegetal and animal matter during the process of putrefaction give off a principle to give origin to a compound which, when applied to the human body, produces a phenomena constituting fever. People got sick from the smells. Miasmas are carried by the air, Smith said, inspired to the air cells of the lungs, the thin, delicate membranes of which they pierce, and thus pass directly into the current of circulation. And so you had the source of all illness was miasmas. And so why did people live alongside Regent's Park? Because there was clean air. It was clean air. And Joseph Priestley had done his experiments in the 1780s, and we knew that trees gave off oxygen and cleaned the air in there. And we knew that and it was believed that the sun brought in and burned off the noxious gases. And so you located alongside Regent's Park, not to only to strut your stuff, but to save your life, because it was clean air. Everyone else died from the miasmas. Now this might have been gobbledygook, but it was the belief in London in those days and a driving force, in my view, for why we had an early park system. And so we come to America. So you have Grissom. Excellent. He uses the same title as Chadwick does it in New York City. All the same filth and stuff they had in London, you had in New York City. You had the Shattuck Report in Boston. Exactly the same stuff, using the same title and using some of the same material that Chadwick did in England. And you find all of these incredible statistics about smallpox and so on. And so New York City, in comes cholera epidemics, yellow fever epidemics, one after another. And so, of course, when Olmsted comes talking about parks, Olmsted, you'll recall, was head of the US Sanitation Committee, knew all about miasmas and all of this stuff. Of course, that was a driving force behind major parks in America. And so why did they come about? Was it because they wanted the people to be able to, relax and so on? Nonsense. It all had to do with economics. Edwin Chadwick was a Poor Law Commissioner. In England, the Poor Laws said the middle class will look after paupers. So when these epidemics came in and the heads of households were wiped out and there was no safety net, all these kids and women running around, the middle class have to pay a tax to look after. And so it gradually dawns on them, as Chadwick said in his report, it is good economy on the part of the administrators of the Poor Laws to incur the charges for preventing the evils. And today we have obesity. Today we have obesity. And so this phrase, pay now or pay later, has been with us in parks for a long, long time, and society bought off and was an initial driver to get us initial parks. And so investments in cleaning the air back in those days were the key to reducing the costs of sickness. So they were prepared to support parks way back when. And this phrase, parks as lungs, has immense power when you look at its context in those days. First used by Pitt the Elder back in 1780, cited in a House of Commons, or House of Lords debate, excuse me, House of Lords debate by William Wimble in 1808. A classic article, The Lungs of London, in Britain's most popular magazine, Blackwood's magazine in 1839. Wonderful description. These parks are lobes embracing the west end of town and extending to the northward. These oases of cleanliness and air, these lungs where it was clean air coming out, very powerful image in those kinds of days. I've got 2 minutes left. Let me talk a little bit about economics over here. Let me tell you the Texas story. Those of you from Texas know it, but let me reiterate it. I spent half my life working in tourism and half in parks and recreation. So this is the parks and recreation then here. And you've got opportunities for local residents, which we produce in local park systems, and you have opportunities for others, pleasure travel, people who come in from outside and use our facilities. So you service two populations here. And the tourism people identify four segments, broad terms, the business travel, of whom the tourism people have no impact whatsoever, but they claim their economic impact. Visiting friends and relatives, personal business, the tourism people have no impact at all, but they claim it all. Convention visitors, convention travel, tourism people claim that. They have a bit of impact there, not as much as they say. Most of it's brought in by locals and given to them. But what really hacks me off is that the tourism people claim that, and that's my territory. Why have they been allowed to claim that? Well, simple model of a tourism system. Been using this for 35 years. People get transported to attractions who inform and promote they're there. So population gets transported to an attraction which provides information and promotion to that population, so they get transported. And then, of course, you've got a bunch of parasites who live off on the hotels and the restaurants and the retail. So the question, ladies and gentlemen, is, what activates that system? Well, the answer is, nobody goes anywhere because they want to spend 2 hours on American Airlines. It's miserable. That ain't why they go. Now, they don't go someplace because they want to spend their life in a Denny's in a different town, or because they want to stay in a La Quinta in a different town, or they want to buy a t-shirt in a different town. They go someplace because there's an attraction there. That's why they go. I ain't got time to go all the way through it. But if you look at the major attractions in America, you're it. The lady just told us about how many million visits, and you got all those status. I mean, there's millions. I mean, people rabbit on about Disney, 40 million visits, and the Corps multiplies that by 10 times in the park service and the rest of it. I mean, there's what? Probably 1 billion or 700 million federal visits when you add them all together. There's another 700 million state. There's goodness knows how many regional. I mean, the theme parks are chicken feed, 175 million a year alongside what you do. And yet, you're considered black hat guys, money down a rat hole. Tourism people, white hat guys, lots of generation money for the economy. How do they pull that off? Well, they pull it off because they do economic impact studies. And so I ain't got time to tell you about Mr. Culp, who founded the Texas Park System, all on tourism. Well, I will. I've got 1 minute. Mr. Culp, here's a story. Mr. Culp was the biggest car dealer in San Antonio. Mr. Culp was selling cars in San Antonio in 1910. Now, if you're selling cars in San Antonio in 1910, what do you need to sell some more cars? Answer: highways. So for 10 years, he's head of the Highway Commission, and Texas built roads so he can flog some more cars. Now he's got his roads in. What do you need after you've got roads in? Well, people didn't commute to work in those days in cars, so you need a reason to get in the car to go someplace. That's parks. So he heads up the Texas Parks Commission. And he goes to all these cities around Texas. He says, if you give us a bunch of land, I'll make sure a road comes through, and you'll have, here's the phrase, the economic impact from all the visitors to your town who are going to visit that park. We're talking the 1920s. He got it, and of course that was Stephen Mather's whole deal, wasn't it, about that kind of a thing. So, economic impact studies, got to do them.